want to change the world.
Welcome to Food Freedom Radio. I'm Laura Hedlund, a student of nature-led gardening and a person who saw the most amazing full moon this morning. I'm taping this on Thursday, so it's Thursday, March 13th, around 7 a.m., and it's bright and it's full. And as it sets, it takes on this incredible orange hue. And I'm driving. It was just such spectacular beauty. And I think one of the most profitable things I can do with my attention is just to witness the beauty. And there's just so much spectacular beauty and wonder all around us. But I'm also a person that is feeling deeply concerned about the rapid fire changes. Many civil servants, people with deep expertise and love for America, are being fired. AI is coming, and the forces of blind extraction have all of our data. Greenland is melting because of climate change. Extractive forces calculate how much money they can make from the raw materials now exposed by the melting glacier. And their formulas for success, they do not take into account the consequences to others from sea rise or the consequences to the more than human world. Many of us are experiencing learned helplessness. The federal government tells the University of Minnesota it no longer will get, as promised, $100 to $130 million for vital research. The Savannah Institute is not getting $500,000 in grants as promised. And the federal government is now canceling $1 billion as promised of money for school lunches. In America, about 20,000 people have a so-called net worth of $24 trillion. While 165 million Americans have a net worth of $4 trillion. Let me repeat this because it's really important that we grasp the financial system with a holistic lens. About 20,000 people have a net worth of $24 trillion, while 165 million Americans have a net worth of $4 trillion. And yet for these 165 million Americans, or let's just say Americans, or let's just say us, or let's just say people. At this time, we're talking about 165 million. You're talking about people. But there's a safety net. We have had a safety net when it comes to food in America. But this very safety net is now under attack. The USDA plans to cut over $1 billion in funding for schools and local food purchases. These are funds that were these were funds that were promised. So to talk about how these cuts could impact Minnesota, I'm very pleased to be joined by the Deputy Commissioner for the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, Andrea Vanville. Welcome to Food Freedom Radio.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So give us a little bit of your background. You've been with the department for a long time.
Yes, I've been with the department about 12 years and currently in this position for about 6 or so. So I've been around for a while, and I have seen nothing like this in my time here in public service. So it's certainly a wild time to be here.
Yeah. So tell me what do you know? I mean, I think many of us felt a gut punch from the news story this week. $1 billion in cuts, already promised funds. So what do you know right now?
Yes. So it's been a little bit of a crazy time right now for obvious reasons. I think there's been a lot of uncertainty. We had we get about 10% of our budget for our agency is federal funding. And a lot of it was frozen and we weren't able to access it. We were not able to get any information about whether or not we would be getting payments for certain things. And again, these are for existing agreements that we had, signed and legally binding. So we just heard late Friday on 2 of our programs. So the Local Food Purchasing Assistance Program, or LFPA, as well as the Local Food in Schools Program, or LFS. That some cooperative agreements that we had just signed in early January were canceled. So what that means in terms of impact is quite significant. So for the Local Food in Schools, this was the first time that they were going to be allowing not just food purchasing for schools, but also for childcare institutions, which is also an incredible piece of feeding our children and sort of our local food sheds. And that was going to be about $13.2 million in food purchasing from local producers around Minnesota. And then for our LFPA program, we lost about $4.7 million that we were anticipating receiving. And in that program, that is also local producers that goes into the Hunger Relief Network. So that goes to feed hungry folks with locally grown and healthy foods. So I guess the upside was that we did hear that the current funding that we have for those programs would be honored. But this fund that we've been promised was canceled.
Okay, and we did break it a little
so
bit there,
obviously we've got a lot of concern. Okay, sorry, I can go back to what I was so obviously huge impacts for not only our farmers around the state, but school districts, our child care institutions, and of course our hunger relief organizations that do amazing work to feed the rising need that we're seeing over the last couple of years for those facing food insecurity.
Well, and I think it's so important. I just want to put out some love right now for all the people dealing with all this hecticity and unpredictable stuff. I'm sure it's it's I was raised with an idea in America that if you say you're going to promise something, you do it. As a parent, you said you were going to go, and even though you don't want to go now, you have to go because you promised. You said you were going to. It's a core value. So we have these funds that we're like, oh no, we got new cover. But it's still as promised, and these are long. So it is disheartening. But I also I think it's so important for us to come together and just and appreciate each other, and I appreciate you in this work that you're doing at this moment, because I'm sure it's hard to stay sane.
Yes, very much so. I was like not really sane before, and now I'm extra not sane. But I think I really feel, especially for a lot of these farmers and organizations that we sub grant to, who are, in terms of farming, it's all about timing, and you need to make plans well ahead of time about, what inputs you need and buying seed and what you're going to grow and signing contracts. And so a lot of the challenge the last couple of weeks has been just the uncertainty of whether or not some of these existing contracts were going to be honored. So again, that, just that sort of uncertainty for the last couple of weeks has also had some significant impact. We were happy to hear that, they will honor those, but it has made a difference, and people have had to change course because, we just couldn't get any information from the federal government. So it has been very just hard on our producers and those who are relying on this food to feed themselves.
So let's take a deep dive into what is the Local Food for School Cooperative Agreement Program. So what is that?
Yeah. So this is a program through USDA AMS, the Ag Marketing Service, that a couple of years ago we had received some funding. I think it was about 3.5. I'd have to check that number, but essentially it helps schools. So school districts, we know of a lot of fantastic nutrition directors who really want to offer locally grown healthy food, have community members who grow this food to offer this to the children in their school districts. But sometimes it can be kind of pricey compared to maybe going to a Sysco or just sort of getting it in bulk from some other company. So we really wanted to make sure that we can help them, get that price differential and make sure that they can purchase some of that food. Again, it's a win-win-win for everybody in terms of the farmers, for the school kids, for the local economy and the local food shed. So it really benefits everybody when it comes to this funding. So we were thrilled to get that funding. It went out. We had a tremendous interest from school districts around the state. And, I think we were really excited to hear that we were going to be getting so much more funding based on the success of our how we'd done it before, and knowing what kind of impact that had, what, sort of more it could do. I think the benefit of these programs as well is that it builds really a base, it builds relationships with local farmers that otherwise hadn't been there, that can, extend well beyond any grant funding that we might provide. It sort of, gets people together, and they see the benefit, and it continues on well into perpetuity. So I think that program's been extremely successful. It builds on an existing program we have at the state, for Farm to School that helps with both food as well as equipment, because that's certainly a barrier. We heard from many schools that, they'd love to have all these fresh fruits and vegetables, but they have no way to, even cut them or provide any sort of way to process them. So some of that was a barrier, and that's something we can help out with. So it's been really well received. I think we were feeling really excited about what this would mean for the Farm to School ecosystem across the state. And so we're trying to figure out what to do next now that we've heard this news.
There's a food activist I've had on my show, and that I follow on LinkedIn, and her name's Erin Martin, and she's been active in a fresh food produce, where they have actually ended up saving lots of money, helping people with diabetes by giving them direct food that's sourced well, and the cost savings has been tremendous. But here's what she put out on LinkedIn as far as this local food agreement. So she says, what does this mean? It means farmers will lose stable contracts and they'll be left with unsold produce. It means schools and hospitals and food assistance programs will lose access to local fresh food. It means rural and indigenous communities who suffer the most from these policies also suffer a lot of other ways, because these local food programs are leveling up a different economic system. And I'll say the inequity, I think it's just like we have economic constipation with a few people having way too much. They're just way an obsession, Bill. And we need to get our economy flowing, and we can do that with food. So we're going to take a break, and we are talking with the Deputy Director for the State of Minnesota Ag Department about the announced $1 billion in USDA cuts to food. We'll be right back.
And here I go once again through these lonely heartaches and pain. That's all remain. Now I know.
Cool. Well, so far so good. And now And Andrea, I feel bad about this, but it's say your last name again for me. I don't know. I'm having
Bobble.
Bobble.
Yeah, like Bobble, but Bobble. Yeah, it's my married name.
I
I should have kept my maiden name. I had a way better last name.
But what was your maiden name, Bobble?
Featherston.
Ah, that is a sweet name.
Yeah, it's my middle name now, but yeah.
Oh, okay. I actually did not know I actually had a call like, what did I remember? Did I change my name after I got married? I never did, kind of personally. And then I did on my check for my work, and I was like, I don't remember. But anyhow, I was like, you go to the wall, what's your name? But finally I actually, it's like, it was on whatever on your driver's license counts. So, but anyhow, we're ready to hop back in.
Right.
Welcome back to Food Freedom Radio. I'm Laura Headland, and very pleased to be joined today with the Deputy Commissioner of Agriculture at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, Andrea Valbo. And we're talking about this $1 billion in USA cuts that was announced this week, and it is really disheartening to even take in that number. But I was commenting that somebody else had commented, Erin Martin on LinkedIn, that what does it mean? It means that farmers are going to lose stable contracts and be left with unsold produce. Schools, hospitals, and foods will lose access to local fresh foods. And millions of savings in healthcare are at risk because local food and healthcare make America healthy again. There's a deep connection there. And she says this is not just a food policy issue, it's an economic and public health crisis. That this program was designed, the fundamental reasons why this program was designed was to strengthen local agriculture, reduce reliance on food imports, while improving Americans' health and while improving rural economies. Do you agree with her assessment?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm just sort of smiling because we were just talking about some comments that we had heard from our current Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And he was talking about how to make Americans healthy again, and and he was naming every tenet of these programs, and about eating healthy food, and even talking about some of the sustainability practices that they're doing at another USDA agency, NRCS, that they are just gutting right now. It's sort of counter to everything they're talking about in terms of making America healthy. And so I think we're still feeling somewhat confused about, sort of the mixed messaging, because it really is, as you said, in terms of the health impacts and the economic impacts that this program has had on many of our rural communities is it can't be discounted, and it's really important. So I just think it's we're trying to figure out kind of what we can do in place of programs like this, or how to see, is this something that we could try and get back? Because as you said, $1 billion across the country. I mean, you look at states like Texas and Florida, who had significant LFPA and LFS programs. There's lots of money that they're missing out on too, and so it's really a nationwide issue that I think we could all sort of coalesce around. But it's just unfortunate.
It is. So let's take a moment to or take a good 5-10 minutes to really understand these programs and how they work. And I'm going to start with the Minnesota Local Food Purchase Assistance Program, because I was able to read all of that, and it's so transparent, right? I mean, it's like, and it's just this. I mean, it's democracy. It's working democracy. And if you want to be an evaluator, you can sign up to be an evaluator of the local food produce, and you'll get a little stipend for like a couple $100 for your hours. And so you have people actually reading this stuff, and it's all the details are there. It's transparent. And I think it's just really vital work. But okay, so how would you describe the Local Food Purchasing Assistance Program?
Yeah. So it's a program where we're really connecting, potentially, USDA uses this term, socially disadvantaged farmers or local producers with the Hunger Relief Network. So I think we talk about, the rising need in the food insecurity space, particularly in Minnesota. Well, really, I think it's, nationwide since COVID. And, that there's all of this fantastic, healthy local food. A lot of times it's culturally appropriate food for communities that are, in a number of areas around Minnesota that have been looking for certain things and can't access them. It was sort of a perfect match of marrying those two things. There certainly is local producers that need markets, and then you've got a market here of folks who really need food and good, healthy food. So it's sort of a perfect match there. The nice thing too is, we are the ultimate grantee from the USDA, but really the magic happens with the folks that we grant it out to. So we have these incredible organizations across the state who have fantastic connections, that have really built networks with farmers in their communities that otherwise they wouldn't have had. So it's sort of the
I printed out the list, and I'm just going to read them. So because this, I think this communicates. So the Audubon Neighborhood Association got $52,000 for its market and food hub. Red Wing Area Food Shelf got $140,000. The Farmers Market Association got $96,000. The Red Lake Band of Chippewa Indians $120,000. The Becker Food Market $139,000. Pillsbury United Communities $86,000. Prairie Rose Agricultural Research Innovation and Education, Alternative Supply Chains for Moorhead's Local Food Economy, $140,000. Keystone Community Services, the Hmong American Farmers Association, Hennepin County Hennepin Farm to Community Program, the Fresh Produce Festival in St. Paul, the Grand Rapids Farmers Markets, Clues Community Action Duluth, Southeast Minnesota Food Rescue and Redistribution, the Twin Cities Food Justice Minnesota Equity Partnership, the Good Acre, the Humanity Alliance, the Open Door, which I actually had a community garden at the Open Door. So one of the things that the Open Door does in Eagan is it has land, and then people who want to, they can get a free gardening space and free sports and free seeds, and so you're growing your own food. These are exactly the right things. These are little emerging wonderful things that I think will help create the food system we all want. We all want a food system that helps us be healthy and knows that we need healthy water and healthy soil and a healthy soil and ecosystem, and it's all this genuine progress. So I mean, but now if I understand this right, these people, they are getting the money that they were promised to, or might you have to renege on some of these people because of the changes?
That's correct. And I'll just point out too, as you read that list, I think a lot of times folks think that food insecurity is sort of an urban thing, or in our cities. It is something that impacts rural communities deeply as well. And so it was important to us to really get some diversity regionally. So you'll hear that we try to touch all parts of the state with the organizations that are using these funds. But you are correct. So we had some initial funds through LFPA, and those are the ones you listed. We also got an additional little tranche of money that called LFPA Plus. And so we haven't been able to announce all of those yet because they're not completed. But we did hear Friday, at the same time that they let us know they were canceling 2025, they did say that they were honoring the 2024, so the existing contracts that we had. Because up until then, the only communication we had received, which I'd say was, again, basically nothing, was that they would honor anything from January 19th and prior. So before the Trump administration started, they would honor those expenses. But we had people, who are making plans, signing contracts, trying to, incurring expenses in real time. So we were really concerned about, certainly as a state agency of our size, we didn't have funding to float to that degree. And so until we knew we were going to get reimbursed, we had to pause payments. And that was really difficult for all of our sub-grantees. So good news is that they will be made whole, and we can, we'll be reimbursed for all of those payments. And so, but we will not be able to continue the program as we had thought. They had initially, we'd gotten the cooperative agreement that we signed in early January. Our state plans were due in April. So we had not submitted those yet. So I guess the upside was that we hadn't had any sort of agreements in place. But I know a lot of folks were really excited, and we had some big plans about how we were going to disperse those funds.
Well, and so we're talking about the Minnesota Local Food Purchasing Assistance Program. You're listening to Food Freedom Radio. I'm Laura Headland, and we're talking with the Deputy Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Agriculture about the recently announced $1 billion in food cuts to USDA. We'll be right back. Patrick? Can you quickly find the song? They plowed. They took down the parking lot and put in. I'm not going to remember.
Yeah, taxi. Joni Mitchell.
Joni Mitchell's, and it was a taxi. Joni
Taxi
Mitchell.
Cab, I think. Maybe.
Taxi Cab, yeah.
I might be wrong on that.
Well, I'm going to see if I'm. Oh, am I live now on LinkedIn? I think it should be. So let's. See if you can find it. If not, I meant to ask you that earlier, but I thought that is a perfect song for this show, and
I love the music.
I do too. I mean, I think it's really. I mean, I do. So, is there anything you want me to make sure that I mention or get in?
I might just mention there's a few other grant programs that we have yet to hear about that are affecting a number of our producers as well. So I'd love to just talk about those a little bit.
Okay, great. I'm ready if you are, Patrick.
They took all the trees, put them in a tree museum, and they charged the people $1.50 just to see them. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? They paved paradise, put up a parking lot.
You don't know what you got until it's gone. This song is from Joni Mitchell. And you're listening to Food Freedom Radio. I'm pleased to be talking to the Deputy Commissioner at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, Andrea Vanbel. And I don't think we know. So tell us, we are losing a lot right now with those $1 billion announced. It's hard to even start to grasp what that means. But but you think that there might be other grant programs. Can you give us an overview again, especially if someone's just tuning in now, as to what? Yeah, in case someone hasn't heard, there's an announcement this week that Trump is cutting $1 billion from the USDA for food support.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. So we states learned late Friday afternoon that they would be canceling some agreements that were signed in early January for our local food purchasing assistance program, or LFPA, and our local food for schools, LFS program. The state of Minnesota was set to get about $13.2 million for our local foods for schools, as well as childcare institutions. And we were also set to get about $4.7 million for LFPA. So something that we were extremely disappointed to be losing out on, especially since, we had a signed agreement that we felt good about and we're counting on. So, I think, as I mentioned before, some of the challenges around the uncertainty has been, I think, one of the sort of things keeping all of us up at night. And again, as I mentioned, in agriculture, certainly you are making real-time decisions. You have to plan ahead. It is all about, the growing season and when you plant and when you buy these things, and it's really time dependent. So to wait and worry and not know if you're going to get reimbursed on some of these things has been really difficult for our producers. So we did hear about LFPA. There's a couple of other programs. One is our Resilient Food System Infrastructure Program, or RFSI. That was a new program as well under the Biden administration. That was unique and folks were really excited about. It really starts to aim at that middle of the supply chain because, obviously COVID showed us that we had some really vulnerabilities in the food system in several places, meat processing being one, but, a lot of other areas within the food supply chain. So this is really to try and get at that. So we had some fantastic grantees that we had, really had agreements with based on this USDA grant. That were making large purchases. We have a Red Lake that was working on a commercial kitchen. We had, a sunflower oil producer that was, purchasing some big equipment. There was just stuff that they really needed to move on. And we still actually don't know yet if they will honor any expenses past January 19th. So that's one that we have not heard whether or not that will continue. And so there's a lot of consternation for our grantees and those that they'll be serving around the state. So there's other pieces, of course, as you mentioned early on with the layoffs, that's been a significant issue for a number of just the people that we serve when it comes to the Natural Resource Conservation Service, who do fantastic work in terms of, helping producers do great things on the land. The Farm Service Agency at FSA, of course, USAID is, of course, having impacts on the ag economy as well. And so we're still sort of waiting all the time. It feels like there's something new every day that affects us. And that's not even to mention the tariffs and what that does to the ag economy as well. But I think the other piece, one thing I'll just mention as well, is we've got a lot of folks around the state who do, who have poultry. So we are the #1 turkey producing state. We got a lot of folks who, have chickens in their backyards, and they got backyard flocks, and they're, doing their thing and feeding themselves in their neighborhood. And we've got something called high path avian influenza that is, absolutely devastating to the poultry industry. And there's, folks being affected at USDA who are integral to the response for us to be able to get this disease under control. So I think there's just sort of wide-ranging impacts that we hear about each day that, you feel like it can't get much worse, and then it does. So I think we're just kind of trying to, do whack-a-mole and figure out how we as the state can help just hemorrhage some of this hurt.
Yeah, and I wanted to watch the whole thing because the movie Dinosaur came to me. It's the old classic Dinosaur with Eladar. As I got a whole VCS today for this, but there's this little clip, and it came when Dr. Sinacropi, who actually has a wonderful health show on our station, Recharging the Human Battery, and he was writing about. It's so hard to be a doctor. You know what the right thing is, and then the insurance will not cover it, and he just poured his heart out, and it was sweet. And the one thing I thought about is that that image flashed back in my mind of Eladar, and it's like, we got to stand together, so find these ways of standing together, because that energy behind let's make America healthy again, that's genuine energy. I mean, we know that we've been farming in a way that's not friendly to the soils, and a lot of people don't have enough money. And I go back to this the simple if you look at the economy from a whole, you have 20,000 people with $24 trillion of net worth. They have very closed ideas about how reality works. And then you have 165 million of us fighting over 4 trillion. So we need to find ways to make money flow. And that's the thing that I find sad about losing these programs, or maybe they won't be lost. Maybe we'll be able to, but about this a lack of federal support for these programs, because the federal support was really important. So let's talk more about, so the local food purchase assistance, that's LFPA. And so in order for a person to apply, the eligible products, there are some criteria for that. So the criteria included 70% must be sourced locally within geographic boundaries of Minnesota. Food must be unprocessed or minimally processed, and it must be distributed to foods in communities, and 75% of that going to underserved people. So how long has the local food purchase assistance program been around, and what type of impacts has it had?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's been around. I'll have to, the year. What is time anymore? I can't even remember what I eat for breakfast. But it's been a couple of years now, and as I was mentioning, we're sort of in a second round. I think another thing that we were excited about with this round that just got canceled is we had heard, our program in Minnesota has been well received, and we've got this really great local food, farm to school, farm to institution group of folks that are organized and passionate and excited. And so, we'd been hearing from USDA that some other states who might be turning away funds, we might be getting even more, just because there'd be money to go, and our state has implemented them well. And so we thought we might even be getting some additional dollars on top of what we were awarded. But yeah, it's been around for a couple of years now. And it's a new program for us. So it took a little bit of time to get it set up and figure out how we're going to do the accounting and the reporting. And again, just a shout out to those who are implementing this program on our behalf. It's, reporting for the USDA for some of these grants is quite extensive, and, can be quite onerous. There's really good reason to have the reporting that they do to make sure that, the funds that are being used in the way that they're supposed to be. But it's a lot of work on top of everything that they're doing each and every day to feed their communities. So it's really a labor of love. And I think, it's one of those things that we felt like if we could get another round, we would have another 3 years of this. Potentially, we could maybe even get some additional momentum at the state level for some funds to help supplement. I mean, I think we really felt like this was our sort of launch pad into something that could really be long term and help us build out those regional food sheds.
So, talk about local food for schools program. How long has that been around, and what type of impact? That's
also been around just a couple of years. I think most of it went to food purchasing in fiscal year 23. So fiscal year being kind of a wonky thing here at the state, but a lot of that went to food in that fiscal year, and it was again incredibly well received, intermixed with some of our state funding as well. And I just have to shout out to our state legislature, who've been incredibly supportive of our farm to school programming. And so I think probably another reason why USDA was willing to give Minnesota some funds is they saw that, the state legislature was investing in this type of programming as well. So food that goes to school districts, and then if we'd gotten this funding, it would have gone to childcare institutions as well. Again, great local healthy foods with local producers. It also sparks amazing, beautiful conversations with children who are like, what is this food, and where did it come from, and why does it matter, and why is it healthy, and all of these things that are important life lessons.
Well, and I'll be doing another show coming up, but I had a great conversation about Kernza, and it was Minneapolis public school students were actually eating some Kernza, and Kernza is a perennial grain. It's great for water quality. It's great for carbon. If we can change over, or actually return to perennial agriculture, it's not change, but return. I mean, before this last post-World War II experiment with chemical farming, perennial agriculture is the way permanent agriculture has so many benefits because it's so complex. The microbes in the soil and how they feed the whole system, it's very complex. So the local food for school program, how is that? Tell us a little bit about how the money works, and when do you think these federal cuts will kick in, and what impact do you think that will have?
Mhm. Yeah, so we're almost completed essentially with the current round of LFS that we had received. Because like I said, there was a lot of interest in that program, and so we didn't have any trouble spending the funding that we were allocated by USDA. So I think we had some really exciting plans for, like I said, we'd gotten sort of initial 3 million, and then USDA came back for this new round and said, do you want 13.2? And we were like, yes, we do. And we've got sort of the infrastructure and the knowledge to be able to really just hit the ground running now that we've built up this program. So I think in terms of impact, it's hard to say because, we weren't able to implement it, but based on the funding that we'd had, we'd helped around, I think we'd involved maybe about 400 producers. There'd been, over 100 school districts that we'd been serving. So, just at that scale, and you can imagine with 13 million, what we could do in terms of impact. And, like I mentioned before, I think what's really neat is we've sort of got different levels. So we call it the first bite and full tray. And so, because it's our marketing people and they're very, very good at that. So it's, really like some of those school districts who are like, I'm not familiar with this. This is new to me. What does it mean? How do I do this? They can sort of wade in a little bit and say, okay, how does this farm to school thing work? We can be helpful. We've got somebody on staff actually that the state legislature funded that helps with all of those things, our farm to school coordinator, and can help build some of those relationships between community producers and schools. And then we also, then we also got the full tray. So that's like folks who are like all in on this, who know what they're doing. They've got long-term relationships. They see the value. We've got some nutrition directors around the state that are just rock stars and really believe in the power of this local food that they're, getting from their local producer. And actually I was just at an event with Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, and she was talking about how she was at a middle school in St. Louis Park who got a farm to school grant, and the guy who grew the potatoes came in, and she was like, they could have cared less. Lieutenant Governor was there. They were so thrilled. They were like, you were the guy who grew these potatoes. She was like, he was like better received than Taylor Swift if Taylor Swift had walked into the lunchroom.
And I bet she appreciated that, right?
Yes.
Because our potato farmers, they are our rock stars. I mean,
Exactly.
it's the farmers that we feed. We would not live without them. And so we'll take a break. We'll be right back. So I think where I want to talk about and is kind of go in this direction of just talking about government in general, because I don't think people really understand that. So that's what I'm thinking about. So if that makes sense to you, unless there's anything you want to talk about.
Absolutely. No, that sounds great.
Okay, cool. All right. Welcome back to Food Freedom Radio. I'm Laura Hedlund, a student of nature-led gardening and a person who saw an amazing full moon this morning. Thursday was one of those times you see the full moon and you can see it turn orange as it drops. And there's just so much beauty and wonder, and yet there's also so much chaos and ecological collapse, thousands of people losing their jobs, tremendous uncertainty, and I'm very pleased right now to be joined with Andrea Babel. She's the Deputy Commissioner of Minnesota Department of Agriculture. And one of the horrible things we heard today or this week was that $1 billion is being cut from the food program. And I don't think people really understand the role of how government works, federal government, and we're all so locked into the drama part, which that's where I wanted to talk about seeing the moon today, because I really want to focus my attention on things that bring me joy.
Yeah.
At the same time that I do that, I also want to be aware of all the stuff that makes me really mad. And it does make me mad that $1 billion is being cut from school lunches. That's just damn wrong. And So I just quickly asked this of AI, so I hope it's right. I didn't double check it, but it says that Minnesota spends more money in the federal government than it receives back, means it's a net giver state with a per capita balance of 779 more than it receives. So what's the role between Minnesota and federal government, especially when it comes to agriculture?
Yes, excellent question. And one that's certainly been top of mind for us, because a lot of folks don't, they're like, okay, it's the government, but we've got the federal government, we've got the state government. We've gotten a lot of folks being like, why are you, cutting these programs? And I was like, I promise you, it's not the state of Minnesota. We believe in these programs. It's the federal level. So and you are correct in that the state of Minnesota does give more in tax dollars to the federal government than we receive in funding back. So we are a net giver to the USA, and so we've got the USDA, so the United States Department of Agriculture. They have a ton of funding on a scale that the state of Minnesota isn't even can barely fathom. And so a lot of times what they end up doing is some programs that they run through states. So they'll say, okay, hey, states, we've got this pot of money, you should apply, tell us what you're going to do with it within these parameters, and then we'll award you these funds, and then you figure out how to get it on the ground. And those have been really successful for us. There's been several that have been that have over the years have just continued on. There's things like our specialty crop block grants that I actually just heard about today. They're going to resume, but one that was uncertain as well. So this was an example. It was this LFPA program and the LFS program that we applied as a state. The USDA said, okay, here's some funding, go do good work within these parameters. And so I think we always really think about the role of government and how, what it means to be a government, and what are the sort of, how can they assist people? And, I hear this all the time, and it's one of my favorite lines. Our former Senator Paul Wellstone said, we all do better when we all do better. And it's really about lifting up everybody. And so there are, folks in our communities that, our neighbors, people that we certainly know are facing food insecurity, and it's a real issue, and it's getting more prevalent. And so, there is, I think, a responsibility for us to figure out how to help our friends and neighbors. And, there are we've got the best farmers in the world. Maybe I'm biased, but they grow incredible food, and, they want to be able to provide those things for their farmers or for their neighbors, as well as, make a living. So I think it's, and I think I mentioned before, 10% of our budget comes from the federal government. So, that we've got these grant programs that we issue, but we also get significant funding to help with our meat inspection program, with our food safety program. So all of those things are uncertain as well. And that makes things really difficult because, we've got people on the state level on behalf of the federal government that ensure that our food is safe. And that, that's again, a public health issue that sometimes gets lost as well.
And we're thrilled that Minnesota is moving so we're the 8th state to do universal school lunch. So which just makes so much sense. I mean, the idea of separating kids, but having universal school lunches. How does the federal program and the state programs work when it comes to school lunches?
Yeah, and that's actually run out of a different agency than ours. So it's run out of our Minnesota Department of Education. I know that they are facing some, significant challenges with what's happening at the federal level with the U.S. Department of Education. So, I think one of the benefits of sort of the strength in the government in the state of Minnesota is that there is state funding for these universal school meals. So there's at least some funding available, rather, despite whatever the federal government does, there's still some things that can move along. Like I was saying with the Farm to School program as well, we still have state funding that can go towards some of these efforts. So that will continue, but it certainly just is not at the scale that we would like to see or know, could make a big impact.
So we only have 2 minutes left, and I think government plays a vital role. But why? Why is government important on this local food? Why do we need the lever of government?
Yeah. Like I said, I think the government is there to, help when you need it. Sometimes we just, have rough patches in our lives, and we need assistance. And it is incumbent upon us as humans to take care of each other. And I think government really plays an important role in that space. I think it's about keeping each other safe. I think it's about building communities and really a shared responsibility to, build a better world. And I think the government can really be helpful in that. And, public service is near and dear to my heart. So this has been especially hard to watch people really, demonize those who work for the federal government and public employees, because they are really the backbone of these services. This is why you get your roads built. This is why you have, the police when you call them because you need help. It's why you have, air traffic controllers. It's like you've got, not that those are all public, but like these are the people who make the world run. And
these are us. I mean, we are all interconnected. And
Yeah.
and I think it's heart-wrenching that people gain power by dividing and keeping people freaked out. And so so how can we gain power? By making people calmer and happier? And that's, but also part of that happiness is when you face each other in sorrow too. I mean, it's but it is, I don't, at the same time, it is, it's got to be tough to be, it's tough right now, isn't it?
It is. And, I think, obviously we're at the state government, but I see like the people that I work with, I just adore. They are the hardest working, most passionate, committed people. And so it's important to me to make sure that they know, despite whatever is happening and whatever conversation's happening about public employees, public service is honorable, and it is good, and it is a worthy cause. So if anyone's listening, if you're a public servant, thank you for what you do.
Thank you to all the public servants, and thank you to all the people who are being human. Yes. How about that? Who's just being human together? All right, let's be human together. So, and thank you, Andrea, for joining me, Deputy Commissioner of Department of Agriculture. Have an awesome day and have an awesome week.
Thank you. You as well. Take care, Laura.